Hare Krishna, welcome to another episode of Bhagavad Gita as it is. We are in the second chapter, and today in this session we are going to cover 10 verses from verse number 2.54 to 2.63. In these 10 verses, we will be studying the qualities of a sthita pragya. Pragya or prajna in Sanskrit means wisdom, buddhi, intelligence, and sthita means steady. So we are going to look at the qualities of a person with steady intelligence, a person who doesn't waver, like when you get some good news, you are very happy. When you get some bad news, you're very depressed, sad, suicidal. So this person, Asthita Pragya, does not oscillate like a pendulum from one end extreme happiness to extreme sorrow. He is in the middle. His intelligence is steady. Another word for Sthita Pragya used in Bhagavad Gita is Achala Buddhi. So Lord Krishna uses the word Achala Buddhi, and he speaks about the nature of a person with Achala. Chala means moving, Achala means not moving. So Lord Krishna tells us about the qualities of a person whose intelligence is not moving. And in the subsequent verse, Arjuna is asking questions about Sthita Pragya. Basically, it's the same thing. So the discussion is on about the person whose intelligence is steady.
We start with Srila Prabhupada's Pranati Mantra. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Okay, so that's an overview of second chapter. Quite a lengthy chapter with 72 verses. We've covered section 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we are on the last section, number 5, which is from 2.54 to 2.72. We will be doing half of that in this video up to 2.63, all about Sthita Pragya, somebody who is fixed in his consciousness and, of course, Krishna consciousness. By working in Buddhi Yoga, one attains material detachment and equipoised platform of liberation called Samadhi. Samadhi can mean different things. So here it's somebody who's fixed in Krishna consciousness, who is equipoised, meaning not too elevated in pleasure and not too depressed in sorrow. Arjuna questions about Asthita Prajna, or about the one in divine consciousness or Samadhi. Such a person is also called a Jivan Mukta. He is in his material body, but he is situated at the soul level. 2.54 Arjuna Uvacha Sthitaprajnasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshava Sthitadhi kim prabhasheta kimasita vrajeta kim. Arjuna said, O Krishna, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak? And what is his language? How does he sit? And how does he walk? Now, Arjuna is asking these questions about the Sthita Prajna, or a person situated with steady intelligence. Now, these questions seem a bit superficial, as in how does he speak and how does he walk. Well, we're not talking about a model, how does he walk? But these questions do have a deeper meaning, and we will find out about that in the next slide. The first question is Ka Bhasha. Bhasha means language, and the literal meaning of this question is what is his language? But the deeper meaning, transcendental meaning, is what are his general symptoms? As in, how do we recognize a person who is steady in intelligence? Lord Krishna gives the answer in 2.55. The second question that Arjuna asks is Kim Prabhasheta? Bhasha, Prabhasha. Bhasha means language, Prabhasha means speaking. How does he speak? Um, the literal meaning is how does he speak, but the deeper meaning is when such a person receives praise or blame or affection or hate, what is his response? What will he say externally and what will he say internally? How will he respond to external praise or criticism? That is what it means. And Lord Krishna answers this in 2.56 and 57. The third question Arjuna asked about Sthita Prajna is Kima Sita? How does he sit? That seems very superficial. We're not talking about a model. But the deeper meaning of this is that how does he restrain his senses from the sense objects? We are in the material world. We've been provided these sense organs by which we perceive the outside world. But senses are very impetuous. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says the senses are like wild horses. They're all over the place. And one has to restrain the senses if one wants to make spiritual progress. So, this question, Kim Asita, basically means how does a Sthita Prajna restrain his senses from the sense objects? The fourth question, Kim Rajeta, how does he walk? Seems very literal. But the deeper meaning is, how does he respond to sense objects? The previous question was, how does he restrain his senses? The next question, Rajeta, is how does he respond to sense objects? And the answer we find from 2.64 to 7.1. So we will not be doing that part in this session. We will do up to Kim Asita. Now we move on to the next verse, 2.55, the symptoms of Asthita Prajna. When mind withdraws from sense objects, a person becomes satisfied by the soul, whose essence is bliss. See, in the material world, our mind is always going outside, looking for more and more newer experience, enjoyments, and our senses are the windows through which we enjoy life. So in this verse, Lord says, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Prajahati Yada Kaman Sarvan Partha Manogatan Atmanyevatmana Tushta Sthita Prajnasta Dochyate. Prajahati Yada Kaman, he gives up all kinds of material desires. Sarvan Partha Manogatan, that arise from the mind. Our mind is the origin of all kinds of material desires. But a person with steady intelligence, he gives up because it's incessant. It keeps on coming and coming and coming. There is no stopping of that. But a person of steady intelligence can see through that and he just gives it up. Atmanyevatmana tushta. He's satisfied in the self as a servant of Krishna. Atmana tushta. Tushta. So he is satisfied. Sthita prajnasta dochite. Such a person is known as Sthita prajna. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O Partha, when a man gives up all varieties of desire for sense gratification which arise from mental concoction, and when his mind, thus purified, finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. 2.56 and 57. The Sthita Prajna's response to dualities or speech. Dukkheshvanudvignamana sukheshu vikataspраha वीतरागभयक्रोधा स्थितधिर्मुनिरुच्यते यः सर्वत्र नभिस्नेहस्तत्तत्प्राप्य शुभाशुभम् नाभिनन्दति न द्वेष्टि तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता. Dukkheshvanudvignamana. This person is not disturbed amidst the threefold miseries. In our material world, we get miseries from three places: Adhyatmik, Adi Bhautik, and Adi Devik. One, the miseries that come from natural calamities, the miseries that come from other living entities, the miseries that we create by ourselves, by our internal miseries. So Dukkheshvanudvignamana, this person is not disturbed amidst the threefold miseries. Sukheshru Vigatasprahan, he is not too excited when in happiness. As I said before, he doesn't oscillate like a pendulum from one extreme to the other extreme. Vitaraga Bhaya Krodha, free from attachment, fear, and anger. Krodha means anger. Bhaya, fear. Attachment, raga. Sthitadir Muni Ruchyate. Such a person is a sage of a steady mind. Yasarvatra Anabhisnehas, unaffected everywhere in this world. Tat tat prapya shubha shubham, by whatever good or evil he may obtain. Nabhinandati nadveshti, whether he receives praise or criticism, he doesn't he doesn't sorry he neither praises nor despises anything. He accepts everything. Tasya prajna pratishtita, such a person is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. Verse 2.58. Yada samharate chayam kurmonganiva sarvashah indriyanindriyarthebhyas tasya prajna pratishtita. One who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects, as the tortoise draws his limbs within the shell, is to be understood as truly situated in knowledge. So here, Lord tells Arjuna that he can use his senses, but only for Lord Krishna's service and not for his own sense enjoyment. And the example is given of a tortoise. The tortoise can withdraw its limbs inside its shell, and it does usually do that when it perceives a danger. So our senses being like wild horses, we're advised to withdraw our senses when we sense danger. And danger here refers to us getting attached to the object of the senses. Verse 2.57. Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehina rasavarjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. Though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense object remains. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. So this is an important verse because Our senses are like wild horses. It's very, very hard to control them. Even Arjuna, who was a great warrior, was highly trained, was finding it very difficult to control the senses. So what to speak of us in Kali Yuga? We come across different so-called techniques for mind control, sense control, but here Lord says these are artificial techniques. Their effect is short-lived. And so the embodied soul, we are soul. We are in our true nature is that we are soul, spirit souls, but we are trapped in this body. So we are called as embodied soul, the soul with a body. So here the practical example is that we like to enjoy our senses, like we like to eat good food, and the youngsters indulge in the other sex related enjoyment and so on. But the thing is that even when we grow old, the desire for sense enjoyment remains, but our body undergoes degeneration. Our eyes stop working, we can't see clearly. Our ears stop working, we can't hear properly. Our tongue loses the taste. We can't taste like we used to taste before. But we still crave for sense enjoyment, even though our sense organs deteriorate. The taste for sense object remains. So how do we control it? So here the solution that Lord Krishna gives is that by experiencing a higher taste, here the higher taste is Krishna consciousness. So sense control by artificial means is not going to work. One has to taste the beauty of the Supreme Lord Krishna. In one and once when one tastes the beauty of Lord Krishna, then he no longer has any taste for dead material things. Once somebody experiences that higher spiritual joy, then all these mundane material things look very, very cheap and tasteless. So that is the only way to control the sense organs. There is no other way. We can try to do meditation and so-called, the transcendental. Nowadays, it's quite fashionable. People go to different meditation classes, but those are temporary and superficial. The true, real way to control the senses is by fixing your senses on the Supreme Lord. Verse number 60. Yatato hyapi kaunteya purushasya vipaschita indriyani pramadhini haranti prasabham mana. The senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry the mind even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. Now, in the previous verse, Lord Krishna gives a secret of sense control, which is by engaging the mind, by fixing the mind on Lord Krishna himself. Because Lord Krishna is so beautiful, so supreme, that once you taste that supreme joy, you will no longer be interested in these material, mundane joys. But one who is not in Krishna consciousness, however powerful he may be, um, in controlling the senses by artificial repression, it will ultimately fail. For we see in scriptures the stories of great sages who have mastered their senses through great austerities, but they, in some moment of weakness, they fall down. And our scriptures talk about the great sage Vishwamitra, who
got seduced by the Apsara Menaka, though he was a very, very elevated and powerful sage. And also we in Bhagavatam we hear the story of Shobari Muni who was meditating underwater. He was such an elevated yogi that he could control his senses and he could breathe underwater. He was meditating underwater. But when he saw some fishes um, mating, he lost control. So the only way, the only permanent, foolproof way to control the senses is by fixing our senses, our eyes, ears, all our sense organs on Lord Krishna. And in this verse, Lord Krishna explains how the senses distract and degrade a person. This the second line, Purushasya Vipaschita, that is a jnani, a person who is highly intelligent. And such a jnani person, even uh, he can fall down. A jnani is one who can discriminate, who can distinguish between matter and spirit. That's the definition of a jnani. But even that person can fall down and get distracted by senses. Therefore, one should perform buddhi yoga. One should not give up work and retire. One should perform buddhi yoga or nishkam karma yoga, which is better than just being a jnani. So Lord Krishna is showing us the defect in practicing jnana, and he's establishing the superiority of bhakti. And here we see in this picture our sense organs like wild horses, the eyes, nose, ears, and so on. And this is a often used analogy in Bhagavad Gita, the analogy of a chariot drawn by the charioteer, a horse-drawn chariot. The horses are the senses, the reins of the horses is the mind, and the person who's driving the chariot is the intelligence, and the passenger at the back is the soul. So this is the analogy used in Bhagavad Gita. And here Lord Krishna says even the most wisest persons are distracted by the senses. Do not underestimate your senses. They can elevate you or they can drag you down. So the secret of sense control is developing a higher taste for Krishna. All other artificial means of control or suppression is ultimately going to fail. Verse 2.61 Tani sarvani samyamya yukta asita matparaha vasehi yasyendriyani tasya prajna pratishtita. One who restrains his senses, keeping them under full control, and fixes his consciousness upon me, is known as a man of steady intelligence. Now, what's interesting in this verse is that till now, Lord Krishna has spoken about um, the matter and spirit, Sankhya, then he spoke about Sakam Karma, he spoke about Nishkam Karma, Buddhi Yoga, and now the qualities of Astita Pragya. But nowhere Lord Krishna has directly used the word Bhakti, Bhakti Yoga. But in 2.61, we find the first direct indication of Bhakti by the Lord. The word Mat Paraha means me, the one who is completely dependent on me. Mat, mine. Para. Mat para means depending on me or fixing his consciousness upon me. So this is a complete 100% bhakti. So those who claim that Bhagavad Gita is all about karma or jnana, we right in chapter number 2, Lord gives the first indication of bhakti, and in the subsequent chapters, of course, the chapter number 7 up to um, the middle 13, it's completely bhakti. But in chapter number 2, Matpara word directly indicates bhakti. So sense control is possible only by devotion to Lord Krishna. All other means of artificial sense control are just temporary, they're going to fail. So if somebody is serious about controlling his senses, controlling his mind, he should definitely take to Krishna consciousness seriously. And another point here which I would like to add is that Sthita Pragya not only controls his senses, but he also controls his mind and focuses them on Krishna. And in 2.60, Lord talked about my senses taking the mind by force to sense objects. And next subsequent verses 6.2 and 62 and 63 will Lord will talk about the consequence of uncontrolled mind. So we come to the verse number 62. Dhyayato vishayan pumsa sangasteshu pajayate sangat sanjayate kama kamat krodho bijayate. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment, lust develops, and from lust, anger arises. So, this is a very important and very popular and a practical verse which teaches us how the signs behind our miseries. Why do we get miserable? It all starts with thinking about certain objects that we fancy. When we think about the objects that we like, we develop an attachment for that object. And by constantly thinking about it, our attachment develops into a craving or lust. Lust need not mean a sexual feeling, it can just mean any desire. And what happens when the lust develops? um, Two things happen. One is if our desire is not fulfilled, it leads to anger. We get angry. And if our desire gets fulfilled, what happens? It leads to greed. We need more of it. So it's a vicious cycle. And it all starts with your thinking. It all starts with your mind. And how mind is controlled? It's the senses. So remember the chariot. It all starts with the horses. The horses fancy something. It goes that direction, and then the chariot follows. So we have to take lesson from this, that be careful about what you think about. When you think of something long without your knowing, you become attached to that thing. It can be a positive or a negative thing, but don't think about it too much. Think about Krishna, and that is the highest perfection of attachment. If you're attached to Krishna, you've made it. But in our normal mundane life, we get attached to so many useless things. And a practical example of this could be um, in youngsters' life. You know, a boy meets a girl meets a boy, and love develops, and then either it has a happy ending or it has a sad ending. So what happens is that when a person thinks about another person, a love interest, they develop attachment. So it all starts with the thinking. And then when that attachment develops into an obsession, a craving, a lust, then either it gets fulfilled or it doesn't get fulfilled, and if it doesn't get fulfilled, it leads to tragedy. And we come to the final verse of this session, 63rd verse. Krodhat bhavati sammoha, sammohat smriti vibhrama, smriti bhramshat buddhinasho, buddhinashat pranashyati. From anger, complete delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. So that is a cycle. Previous verse we discussed about how thinking about an object, prolonged thinking about an object leads to attachment, and attachment in turn leads to lust, and lust, when not fulfilled, leads to anger. And what happens later when you get angry? What happens? Your memory gets diluted. It's a practical understanding. When we are angry, we cannot think properly. Our brain does not loses the discrimination to think what's right and what's wrong. Therefore, angry people act like mad. In English, another word for anger is mad. Oh, she's got mad at me, or he's got mad, meaning he's angry. So anger removes your discrimination from your intelligence, and you act like a mad person. So first contemplation, then attachment, then lust and anger, and then delusion. When delusion happens, your memory is bewildered and your intelligence is lost. You cannot make a proper decision. So it's often advised that people do not make decisions, hasty decisions, when they are angry. And then finally, what happens when the intelligence is lost? One falls down into the material pool. So these are the stages of falling down due to uncontrolled mind. It's a perfect science of mind control, and we would benefit by actually applying it in our day-to-day life. And so we have come to an end of this session, and just a recap of what we have discussed so far from verse 54 to 63. It all starts with Arjuna's questions, because in the previous session, Lord Krishna spoke about Achala Buddhi, a Buddhi which is steady. Therefore, Arjuna asked certain questions, 4 questions about what are the qualities of a Sthita Prajna, a person of steady intelligence. And then Lord Krishna talks about the symptoms of recognizing a Sthita Prajna. Sthita Prajna's response to dualities, whether he's praised or whether he's criticized, it doesn't make any difference to his peace. And sense control, how does Sthita Prajna control his senses, like a tortoise who withdraws his limbs. And then we learned about experiencing a higher taste, the ultimate, the permanent remedy of sense control is only by engaging our senses in Krishna. All other means of sense control are fallible, meaning is going to fail. Only when we experience the highest taste of Krishna consciousness, highest the joy, the beauty of Lord Krishna, we will automatically leave behind our smaller taste. A brilliant example of this is, remember when you were small, you used to play with toys, girls used to play with dolls, boys used to play with little motor cars and this and that. But as you grew older, you develop new higher taste. You had your friends, and your taste changed. Your taste developed, and you no longer play with those kiddish toys. Similarly, when our taste matures, we will find taste in Krishna consciousness, and we will not be lured by the toys of the material world. And then Lord Krishna talks about how even the jnani, the wise people, are distracted by senses. And there are examples of Vishwamitra Maharshi, Shavari Muni, who fell down from their high elevated position just because of their senses. And then we spoke about sense control. So, first sense control and then mind control, because senses directly are connected to the mind, just as in a horse carriage, the horses are directly controlled by the reins or rope. Like that, the mind is controlled by the senses. And then finally, we saw the different stages of falling down due to an uncontrolled mind, how our senses take the mind to certain objects, and the mind starts thinking about those objects. Prolonged thinking leads to attachment, attachment leads to craving or lust, and then that leads to anger when it's not fulfilled, and anger leads to delusion and the loss of intelligence, and finally the sadhaka falls down. So this is a very practical section of Gita which we should very well apply in our lives. So with that, we come to the end of the session. I hope this has made some sense, and please do comment and share your thoughts below in the comment section. And in the description, I've given the WhatsApp number where we have our Greek Gita group. Please, you're welcome to join that. Till then, Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.